My name is Cheria, and for a living, I turn workplaces into growth spaces. This podcast is a front row seat into my own personal and professional development as I talk with inspiring people about the growth that takes place at the intersection of work and life. Welcome to Grow There with Cheria. So I'm curious, for those of you who went to college, what did you study? And are you currently working in the field that you studied to be in? I'm so curious. I wish I could see and hear you say yes or no. Me, I am not in the field that I studied. I studied theology in undergrad. And for years, I thought to myself that I had wasted my time. Um, I knew that I hadn't wasted my time personally. It was very meaningful for me to study theology on a personal level. But professionally, I thought I'd completely wasted my time. That is until, I don't know, about 5 years ago. I was talking with a friend who also studied theology, and it clicked for me all of a sudden. This is why I love culture work. This is why I do culture work, because there's so many parallels between theology and the study of, let's say, a belief system and how that belief system came to be and what's the infrastructure that holds that belief system together, and what I do in culture work for companies and looking at the belief systems within the companies and how those beliefs translate into behaviors and experiences and outcomes. And then all of a sudden I realized, gosh, I guess I'm kind of like a corporate theologian or a corporate philosopher at the very least. And so I realized that at some point, everything started to click and make sense in my career. And there's a reason why I'm sharing with you this story, because I feel like today's guest has a kind of a similar situation. And I'm going to let her tell her story without getting in the way, but I'll just start by telling you some cool stuff about Brigid Walsh. So, Brigid has had a truly dynamic career spanning entertainment marketing, public relations, TV and documentary production, business development, strategy development, and she has done this for A-list celebrities and worked for some of the most renowned brands such as Condé Nast, Mario Testino, and she spent nearly 10 years as an executive at Vogue magazine. But what she's doing now is fascinating. She is now certified in sustainable design from the Pratt Institute and permaculture design from the Center of Bioregional Living. She has shifted her focus entirely into what I think is environmental innovation. And in 2023, she founded 100 Miles North, channeling her expertise and passion into the field of environmental design. If you have no idea what any of those things are that I just said, you are about to find out, and I can't wait for you to hear from her. So, without further ado, it is time to grow there with Brigid Walsh. Hello, Brigid. It's so good to see you.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
It's such a treat when I get introduced to anyone by Fran Hauser, because she's such a gem. And she was on the first season of the podcast. And when she mentioned that you would be a great person to have on, and I was reading all about you, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is a soul connection. I'm so excited to have you here and
Oh,
to have you share.
thank you. I really appreciate that. And you're right. Fran is just an amazing person and just lets us all know that everything's possible, right? And the
Yeah.
way that she uplifts us all and kind of takes us along with the ride is
Yeah.
really always generous. And it's always great to see her.
So true. It's so true. She's so generous. Well, listen, we're in season 2 of the podcast, and we're talking about these growth stories that take place at the intersection of work and life. And I really want to dive into your story, but I also want to make sure that people know a little bit about you and what you do, because even though I shared on the upfront, I feel like what you do is so unique and new to many people. I'm sure they read the word permaculture and they're like, "What is that?" You know? So,
Good.
I'd love if you don't mind to just share a little bit about your background before we dive in.
Great. Well, I could start from the beginning, but if we want to just kind of like start with how I got to permaculture and that word and what it means and what it now means to me, because it really was a perfect intersection between something that was happening personally for me and this just came about,
Yeah.
and it's pretty extraordinary. So I live in the Hudson Valley, and I'll back up later and tell you a little bit about how I got here, but my husband and I have a very old house that's been in his family since the early 1800s. It's an old
Mm.
stone house, and he comes from we both are Irish background, but his, ancestors came to the Hudson Valley to harvest bluestone from the quarries here that were
Mm.
became the sidewalks for New York City. So
Wow.
anyway, our house is on an old bluestone quarry, and there's always been this flooding situation happening in the basement, and I watched for years and years and years, he and his uncle sort of battle this thing, but they kind of just got into this habitual way that they always did it, which was, "Oh, it's gonna rain, let's prepare, let's plug in this pump," and it never, it was just sort of it was kinda cute to watch them sort of always do this thing. It was like a shtick that they had with the water, right?
Yeah.
And one day I was just like, "There's just gotta be a better way." So I stood back and kinda looked at the situation and started Googling, water flooding prevention and,
Mm.
a lot of these videos were getting fed to me. And I'm like, that's not really what I'm looking for. That's not really what I'm looking for. And then this video popped up that was this group in Oregon that was working with timber crop farmers. And they decided to engineer this system that, the whole mountain was eroding because it was just like water every year and they were only
Mm.
growing one crop, which was the timber crops. And there was just flooding and erosion and it was really affecting the town below. So this permaculture group came in. I had never heard the word before. This was in late 2022,
Mm.
and they created this whole system of cascading ponds down the mountain that were capturing the water, pulling it into the soil. And cut to 2 years later, there's no erosion, there's no flooding, there's diversity of all these different plants now growing, frogs, birds,
Wow.
flowers, and the hillside is really healthy. There's no more erosion. The timber crop people can still, you know, cut down their trees and whatnot and replenish them, but there's this whole kind of ecosystem that's growing underneath that
Mm.
work. And I'm like, that's what I want. That's what I'm talking about. I
Yeah.
want to understand like what is happening on our property and is there a better way to do this? So I looked up I'm like, there's gotta be somebody in the Hudson Valley doing this, Permaculture Hudson Valley, and I came upon this guy named Andrew Faust, who has a place in Ellenville called the Center for Bioregional Living, and I saw that he trains people in permaculture.
Wow.
So, I immediately signed up. I met him, he came out and did an analysis of our property, I signed up for his class, and I was still working in New York City at the time with my corporate fashion clients, and we'll get to
Mhm.
that story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just started plotting a course. I'm like, "This is what I wanna be doing. I know
Wow.
this is what I need to do." And so I launched an environmental design firm in November of 2023. I'm certified now in permaculture design and also in sustainable design from the Pratt Institute, and launched this company that's just taken off. Permaculture essentially means permanent agriculture. It's a
Mm.
design system where everything in the system is circular, in that anything you add to the system has an output that it helps something else, and that
Oh,
thing then has an output that helps something else. So everything has an input and an output from another thing that's in the system. So, for
wow.
example, a certain plant or a tree needs to be near another certain type of plant or tree to be pollinated, but then that also has an output that is helping another plant species or a water system or something else. Now, nature's been doing this from day one.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just that our industrialized systems sort of started to cut those out and undermine them and put us in the predicament that we're in on the planet right now. So
Mm.
what permaculture's looking to do is bring back old world systems, including terraced garden systems that you can see still in Italy and Greece, water systems that the ancient Romans used. These are all very low tech things that worked
Yeah.
very, very well that, as we modernized and sort of monetized these
Mhm.
systems for people, they kind of all disappeared. So we're bringing back a lot of these systems that will actually make our lives a lot easier and actually repair the planet in the process.
Yeah.
So, what I'm doing is working to popularize permaculture because a lot of people
Mm.
that have working in the permaculture world or in the environmental systems world are doing it in a very kind of, I guess we can say, a little bit of a crunchy way where it's like,
Mhm.
oh, let's all be off grid, let's be homesteaders. But I think that there's a different way about it. There's
Yeah.
there's there's people that are totally off grid and homesteading. Then there's people that are over engineering things and creating new technologies that are financed by Silicon Valley. But I'm working on something that's kind of a combination of the two. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's great to use a little bit of tech, but what can we do that's more low tech and working more in this sort of homesteader world, but let's popularize that and make that accessible to everybody. You don't have
Yeah.
necessarily have to, like, unplug everything and go totally off the grid to do a little something to help the situation, and I think one of the problems is that in why we all kind of feel a little bit stuck and scared is because we think it's kind of all or nothing, right? Like, we either have to,
Mm.
like, totally off grid and
Yeah.
live this, like, crazy homesteader life, or we just throw up our hands because we don't really know what to do. There's not
Mhm.
one place you can go to get all the answers to everything, and my goal is to eventually grow this into something that's like the Angie's List of eco,
Mm.
where super accessible. You can figure out what products you need to make your kitchen green. You can figure out what
Yeah.
products you need to be able to clean your house and keep your children safe. You can do things to with your energy systems and your water systems. And even as someone who lives in an urban environment and doesn't own a property, there's plenty of things that we all can be doing every day to just incrementally make it a little bit better and not feel so overwhelmed that there's nothing we can do.
Ugh, this
So,
is so exciting. It's fascinating. I have so many more questions, and it's interesting. I wanna dive into your story that you're gonna share in a second here, but as I'm listening to you talk, my work is in organizational culture and developing these cultures. And now I'm like, I need to deep dive into permaculture just to think about how that system might apply within organizations' cultures. Because what you're talking about with the kind of give and take reciprocity, whatever's happening within the system feels so pointed for needs that we have in workplace culture. So my brain is exploding.
you're absolutely 100% correct, and it was kind of one of the places my brain went originally when I heard about permaculture because my background was in doing business strategy for big global brands. I'm like,
Wow.
"Oh, wait, we have to retool the way that companies are structured." One of the things I had learned is that, we use a pyramid structure a lot of times in
Mhm.
corporate structuring, but there actually are zero direct triangles in nature.
Mm.
Nothing is a triangle. So if you look at how nature makes things super efficient and you use it's called biomimicry when we look at something that is in nature and we mimic it in a human system,
Yeah.
there's nothing that's a triangle. Yet all of our corporate structures are designed
Wow.
in a way that's just not efficient at all. So
Oh,
anyway, yes, food for thought and a lot of work
oh
to
my
be done
gosh.
there.
We're gonna have to offline some of this, because I need to soak up some knowledge in this space. This is so good. I'm, like, on fire right now. Um,
Great.
well, let's dive into your story. Tell me about a story of something that happened at the intersection of work and life that helped you grow.
Thank you. I've had a few, so I'm gonna kind of start a little bit from the beginning. I come from a very large family. I'm the youngest of 9 kids,
Wow.
and I had the privilege of having an incredible mom and dad
Mm.
that were just completely charismatic. Our household was super fun. It was really creative. There were always costumes and shows being put on and music and singing, and it was just really incredible, really,
So
really
fun.
incredible. So from day one, I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. I remember saying to my mom once when I was maybe like 10 or something that I wanted to be a newscaster and that I wanted to be like Maria Shriver. And my
Yes.
mom was like, "Could you pick somebody, like, a little more intellectual, maybe, like Walter Cronkite or something?" But I wanted to, like, hybrid this sort of, like, I wanna be a model and I wanna be a
Mm.
newscaster, right?
Mm.
But the long and short of it was that by the time I got into college, I went to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles.
My sister went there.
I Oh, she did?
Yeah.
Cool. I grew up in Southern California. I wanted to be a lawyer in the music industry.
Mm.
So that was what I had my sights set on. And by the time I was a senior, junior, senior, I got this internship at a PR firm and it just took off really fast. I mean, I didn't know necessarily that actors or actresses or people got on TV or got in magazines because there were people behind the scenes, like,
Mm.
puppeteering that. I thought they garnered the attention and
Yeah.
like, let's go. So I was just like, I can't believe this is a job. This is incredible. And the woman that I first got my internship with, she just threw me into the deep end of the pool and she's like, here you go, figure it out. Here's a bunch of clients, just do your thing.
Mm.
And I learned so much so fast, and I was in that within a couple of years, I started my own company. A lot of very high profile actors came with me, and I had that company for quite a while, and I was running around the world promoting blockbuster films and
Mm.
had some really great clients that stuck with me for a very long time, and it just kinda ran its course for me. I think it was sort of a cultural thing where PR kinda became more about pop culture celebrityism at that time versus it being something that was more about strategic marketing
Yeah.
for actors, and it kind of felt more like babysitting than it felt like doing smart work. So, what happened then personally and very profoundly was someone I had been kinda dating on and off over those years. We stayed friends all those years, but my mother passed away, and,
Mm.
he it was just a coincidence, called me from Spain, was on the road, he's in the music industry, and was just calling to say happy Thanksgiving, and I was like, "Oh, we got, trouble over here." And he flew from Europe to come to my mom's
Mm.
funeral, and we you know, you just figure out as life happens, you figure out who your people are, I think,
Yeah.
and who really shows up, and we got married within a year or so, and then I moved to New York, left my Los Angeles life altogether,
Wow.
and he also gave me this freedom and kind of said, "Take your time and figure out what you wanna do," which
Mm.
is such an incredible gift, right?
Mm.
And New York City, I feel like just brought out the best of everything about me. I mean,
Mm.
I just met so many incredible people. I just felt on fire. I felt alive and anything was possible, really.
Yeah.
And I ended up landing at Vogue magazine where I was for about 10 years running a division of the marketing department there and just met some of the greatest people, and the work ethic was just incredible, and the intelligence, and it was just like a training ground, even though I had already, like, had a whole career before that, but this is
Sure.
career number
Yeah.
2. The training ground was just really extraordinary, and it was the first time I had actually worked for a big corporation. I'd never done that before. I was always with these mom and pop kind of PR firms and then had my own thing. So, that was really an incredible time period, but it's just my nature. I kind of outgrew that as
Yeah.
well, where I felt like it had kinda hit an intellectual peak for me, like, "Okay, I get it. I feel good. I'm good at this. I'm succeeding. I'm getting promoted." it's all great, but
Yeah.
I kind of think even though it sounds good on the outside and it sounds really fancy and everybody loves to be able to say I work at Vogue, I was just kind of bored. So I actually at that point had gotten an executive coach who has been I still work with him. It's been 8 years or so.
Wow, that's
Incredible.
amazing.
Highly recommend that if you're thinking about making a career shift or just in general, like
If you win.
need a little push always to know what's next. So then I moved to London and became the head of business for Mario Testino, the fashion photographer.
Mm.
And that was just an eye opener. I felt like I had no reins whatsoever. I mean, Mario was just like, okay, here's all my businesses. They're doing really well. But what's next? I just want you to like
Mm.
have no boundaries and just dream things and make them happen. I was
Wow.
like, "This is so fun." I
Yeah.
mean, it was so fun. So, so, so fun. But he, hit a Me Too situation,
Mm.
and everything collapsed, like, really, really fast, like, just when we're
Mm.
on the verge of doing things. So, I got out of there quickly. I was like, "Okay, I don't even wanna know what happened." I
Mm.
mean, I could, like, dive into this and, go talk to the people that it happened to, but I hadn't been there that long. It apparently all that stuff had happened a
Yeah.
while before. It was, I mean, good. That era got rid of a lot of people that needed to go, and I
Yeah.
think it also really transformed, really, really transformed the way I understood what was happening in the fashion industry and
Mm.
also what had been happening in the entertainment industry when I was a
Yeah.
publicist. I mean, I
Yeah.
had a complete come to Jesus with myself about the complicity of PR
Mhm.
people
Mm.
in all of that. It's like we
Mhm.
were just sort of groomed to hide it, pretend like it's not a big
Yeah.
deal. I was just ill for
Yeah.
months and months thinking about like, oh my
Yeah.
God, that culture is just really, really bad.
Mm.
Um, and had to kind of come to grips with myself about what I turned an eye to just because I was kind of trained to normalize it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of us that had that, and it ran the gamut. The fashion industry was
Mhm.
pretty bad too. Anyway, after I left Mario, I started doing strategic consulting for fashion brands, and so I was spending a lot of time in New York City. A lot of agencies and a lot of brands were hiring me to come in and exactly what you're talking about. Look at what their systems are. Look at what's working, what's not working. Are they missing out on revenue streams? What changes that can they make? Are there staff that are misplaced in where they
Mhm.
have them in the organization? And maybe if they took some time to talk to them, maybe they could thrive a little bit more somewhere else within the organization. And I was having a blast doing that. But that's when this permaculture light bulb went off,
Yeah.
and I was just trying to fix a problem one day, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, this is everything coming together." It's everything that I've known about marketing, it's everything that I've known about business strategy, but my client is now Mother Earth, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it kind of really fit in because I remember way back in the day when I was in PR, I remember always people would say, "You just don't seem like a like all the rest of the publicists. Like
Mhm.
you're just different." And I don't not
Mhm.
really sure what they meant. I took it as a compliment, quite frankly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I remember being at Vogue and overhearing a client or somebody saying like, "Oh, you got to meet Brigid. She's not like everybody else. She's kind of crunchy." And I'm like, "Okay, is that a compliment? Maybe. I guess." So I always have felt like I'm kind of like this country girl that wants to keep her hands in the dirt. That's sort of
Yeah.
like how I grew up.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing that I found something that allows me to do that. And
Mhm.
my days are kind of mixed up between like some days I'm driving a tractor and I'm, have my hands in the dirt, and then
Yeah.
I have to drop what I'm doing to come be on camera and
Mhm.
talk to someone like you or go to a client meeting in the city because we do also ecological strategy for brands. And because I figured the very first thing
Yeah.
I did was like, well, why not utilize the people that I know and just
Absolutely.
I mean, this permaculture literally applies to everybody and everything.
Well, there's just so much here, and thank you for sharing all of that, and, as I'm listening to your journey, I love how you couldn't plan this. You couldn't plan that you would find this very particular passion. To me, when I listen to how you talk about your career, it feels similar to mine in that there's an intuitive movement into
Mm,
what's next and not necessarily a plan, but also there's a courage to try something and just go for it. So I'm curious if that resonates with you, and if so, where that comes from.
yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I realized that even though they sound super fancy and by design, that I was, in a high profile position in the entertainment industry and then a high profile position in fashion, it was all random. Like,
Mhm.
and I kind of like in my heart felt a little bit like I was cheating because
Mhm.
these were all things that kind of floated past me, and I took the opportunity, and I didn't really ever have to try that hard
Mm.
to get those opportunities, but, it's no different really than if you grew up in the Midwest and everybody in your family always did X, Y, or Z, and you went into that thing because it was right there and it was in front of you. It's just that these sound fancier. But the
Mm.
truth of the matter is that you wake up one day and you go, like, "How did I end up here? And do I really wanna be that person that is doing this for 25 years and looks totally miserably unhappy?
Mm.
No, I don't." And
Yeah.
then, I would get lucky and the next thing would come by and I'm like, "Okay, I'll take that." And I think it's super exciting at the beginning and then I'm like, "Oh, wait, I just did the same thing again," right?
Mhm.
This is the first time I actually had the courage to devise it.
Yeah.
Um, what and it was a little bit of a hybrid. I mean, it does take some leaping off of the cliff.
Yeah.
There's never a
Definitely.
perfect scenario where it's like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna work in this corporate job until this other thing that is my dream, 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 dream scenario happens to happen past me." It's probably not gonna happen, so what I ended up doing was I still had my clients in the city. I made the from the moment I got into the permaculture course, it was like, "I am going to sock away every dime I can
Yeah.
and until I get to the point," and I had made a budget of what I needed to be able to start the company and the whole thing, a 3-month runway where I
Mhm.
don't have to work, where I can focus on launching the business. So it was a combination of real thoughtful planning with the help of my coach, who gets into the nitty-gritty of the budgets
Yeah.
and what you need and la la, and just going, "I'm going for it."
Yeah.
And and
Yeah.
it's that combination. It's the planning that gave me the courage to do the go for it, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of leaping into faith. I mean,
Amen.
every day, right?
Yeah.
As we build into the new year, there's a lot of strategic planning and a lot of things that have to go on paper to be like, "Okay, what am I doing year 1, year 2, year 3?" But at the same time, every day, I gotta just go for it, and
Yeah.
because 'cause I'm going into territory that no one's gone into before. I met with lawyers about because 'cause I'm also a general contractor now, so
Mhm.
I'm like a lady GC. There's not a lot of, women out
Yeah.
there that are, like, swinging a hammer and, doing the thing, so I met with these lawyers that do contracts for contractors and people that are in the construction industries, and because you have to have a lot of insurance and you have to, like,
Yeah.
really have everything buttoned up. And they're like, "Well, we don't quite understand. So, like, you're designing things and you're building?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, usually people just do one or the other." And I said,
Yeah.
"Well, I'm not. I'm doing both. So what I need you to do is I need you to figure out what how you're gonna get me
Yeah.
covered with this thing that you've never heard of because I'm not coming in to create this industry or to create this business to just fall in line
Mm.
with doing it the way that people have been doing it for 50 years that does not work, is highly toxic, is not
Mhm.
thoughtful, is bad planning. So we're going to do it differently. And I need you guys to think about what
Yes.
the paperwork is that allows me to do it differently."
Oh, I love it so much, and what I especially love is just the kind of the symbolism around you coming in and disrupting an industry to take us back in time, you know? Sometimes the best innovations aren't creating the thing that's new and different. It's actually reminding us of what always worked. And I
Mm.
think that there's something so beautiful about that. I'm curious through this whole, I mean, there's just so many nuggets, how you met your husband and how you have the realization of when you see a person show up for you in a time of grief, you really realize this is someone who's invested in me and cares about me, and I want to care about them. It's so beautiful to hear that. And it really resonated with me when you talked about the complacency with the Me Too, that whole industry. I used to be in the music industry and I was a singer, and I feel like that's such a vulnerable thing to share. I'm so grateful that you did. And I feel like I had experiences of my own where I didn't stand up for myself. And I think those are such huge growth moments, moments that stand out in my mind. Thankfully, I just want to acknowledge that there are various levels of trauma, and mine
Right.
was fairly minimal. But at the same time, it it changed me in some way. And it's interesting because I'm actually in a very specific kind of therapy right now that's all voice related, that's voice therapy. And part of it is repairing my relationship to my singing voice, but also recovering from an industry that was really toxic in so many ways. And
Yeah.
so I think that there is so much to say around the world. It really ties back into what you're doing, but the world that we see that exists and that we go about it and think that this is just the way it is, when each of us
Mhm.
have the opportunity to look at it and say, "Yeah, but does it have to be this way, and can it be different, and how can I add value, and also how can I know when is right to draw a line in the sand and say we've gone too far." And in many ways, you're drawing a line in the sand to create this earth first business. I love that you call it earth first, and I think that it's just such a powerful thing. So anyways, I know that we can go on and on, but I have two questions for you. One, I in this journey that you've been in, how would you summarize your growth up until this point?
Well, first of all, I just wanna acknowledge that you're having the bravery to talk about the industry and
Mm,
how the norm is toxicity.
mhm.
It's it takes all of us every single day to remind ourselves that's not cool.
Yeah.
And it happens every day in my work because everyone is so used to making decisions that are quick, easy, and get it over with fast. And most of those decisions are toxic and not right for the planet. Right. So it's
Mhm.
like, even though people know they're hiring somebody that's going to do it environmentally, they get annoyed, they get upset, they get like, "Well, why can't you just get it tomorrow from Lowe's?" It's like,
Mhm,
"Well, no,
mhm.
that's not how we roll." So I have to even remind myself as someone who's interacting with clients that I have to have the bravery to stop them in their tracks and say, "That's not what we're here to do. We're here to do repair work, right? We're not
Yeah.
like we're repairing the planet in the process of evolving your space."
Mm.
And it's not gonna be convenient. It's not gonna be as fast as if you clicked an Amazon button and it came from wherever.
Mhm.
And it's gonna put you out of your comfort zone. But the same thing is true with what you and I are talking about those industries, is that sometimes we would 99.9% of the time be like, "What do I have to do to just get out of this room as fast as
Yeah,
possible?"
yeah.
And not disrupt the turnip cart and, everything else, and that's why Harvey Weinstein got away with it for so
Mhm,
long, is because everybody
mhm.
was just like, "Just get me the hell out of here
Yeah,
and, get me to my next job." But anyway, I just want to acknowledge that we have to fight that fight every
yeah.
single day, and we have to be brave enough to say, "You know what? This is gonna be super uncomfortable, but we're
Yeah,
just not gonna do it anymore."
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so back to your question about summarizing my growth, I would just say that growth is constant. And I think it has to be. I mean, I love change and I crave change. And
Mm,
even though I say my time at Vogue was 10 years, I actually left there several times and came back.
mm,
And I had major growth. You have to break things apart to grow. Like
Yeah.
when you just stay in the same spot, it's not going to happen. So, yeah, I would just say that growth is constant and it has to be constant. And I think feel, feeling positive about when something is uncertain is a good feeling to get used to.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And, my next question is going to be bringing it back into kind of the business world and the culture world. I'm curious what advice you would give to business leaders or to businesses about how what you've learned through your career, through your journey of becoming, what would be helpful to businesses and business leaders to consider when they are building their cultures or thinking about their company cultures?
It's a great question, and it kinda goes back to what you were saying about how the permaculture philosophy can be applied to businesses, and I would say, number 1, you have to be nimble.
Mm,
Time and time again, and I had a stretch in my career where, that's what I did was to come in and talk to organizations and build systems for organizations that allow them to have change,
yeah,
constant change. Most organizations are not built that way. They were structured a long time ago. They're stuck in those systems, and you hear time and time again leaders say, well, it's always the way we've done it. It's not working anymore. So
yeah,
create a system that allows change, allows to be nimble, and also allows everybody within an organization to have a voice in what that means. A lot of people get into big organizations and they just get comfortable in their job, and they don't have any real upside to bringing up suggestions that upturn the system. They're not gonna make any money. They're not gonna be promoted. They're like, if anything, they're operated out of fear that if I change things, then maybe I become obsolete. But if
mm,
you think about it in technology, our apps get updated sometimes every other day,
yeah,
once a week, and those are fixing bugs in the system. So we need to be constantly fixing bugs in the system of how your organization is run. I would
yes,
say we do it with
yes,
our landscape work all the time, where it's like you don't just plant it once and you go, "Okay, see you later." You're checking on it, you're making alterations,
yes,
you're checking the soil content. Is it acidic? Is it not? And you're doing little tweaks and things to make it work more efficiency and make it grow better. So I would just say nimble and open to change is number 1.
oh, that's so good, and I feel like I need to take the transcript of this and ask ChatGPT to make this my new sales pitch for culture work for Grow There because it really is it's a constant. People often similar to your Lowe's analogy, wanting things to move fast, people often bring me in and want a quick fix of their culture, and this is actually a constant. It's we can come in and we can change the temperature quickly, but then we're gonna have to do a lot to maintain that and a lot to recognize when seasons change and you have new challenges that you're dealing with. It's a day in and day out thing, so I feel like there's so many parallels between what we do, and it makes so much sense that your career journey has led you to do what you're doing now outside of the corporate culture world and
No,
strategies.
but that section of my career actually taught me a lot about what I'm doing now, and I feel like you probably see this a lot, that a company will say they want change,
Mhm.
and they will go through the motions, but at the end of the day, when it comes to implementing it,
Yeah.
they don't really want it. They don't
Yeah.
really want
Yeah.
it at all.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, that is so good. Well, we're gonna go into rapid fire. We'll do our best to keep these rapid fire, but I've got a handful of questions for you. So
Okay.
fill in the blank. Growth is
Essential, and I
mm.
mean that emotionally, not financially.
Oh, I love that. What was the very first thing you realized you were good at as a kid?
I would say making people laugh.
Love that. What was your very first job?
I was a dishwasher at Scarcella's Pizza in Temecula, California.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Scarcella's. I've never been there, but I wish I
I don't know if it's still there.
Yeah. Who was the best boss you ever had?
I would say my mom
Oh, I love that. I love that.
is the best.
I love that so much, and holding space for you as always because I know we're just coming out of the holiday seasons, and no matter how long you have been without someone you love, it's still tender, and
Uh,
so, yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. What's something you're trying to learn right now?
Well, I'm always learning. I realized after going through my permaculture certification and my sustainable design certification at Pratt that I'm now a lifelong learner. I'm going to
Mm.
constantly be in a class or be doing something. But right now I'm learning woodworking.
So fun. Oh,
Yeah, which
that's
I'm
so
super
fun.
excited about. We just took down some limbs off of an old black walnut tree in our property, and I've now gone through all the different processes, and you guys will see this on social media, but we're making it into furniture and cutting boards and all
Oh,
kinds of cool stuff.
that is
Yeah.
so rad. I love that so much.
Thank you.
What's something you're trying to unlearn?
I really wanna unlearn alcohol as a given.
Yeah. Mm.
I just grew up in a system, and a lot of my friend circle, it's just a given that it's
Mm,
like we drink, and I have to unravel that. It's just
mm,
a big fat waste of time.
mm. Thank you for
It's
sharing that.
fun, it's
Yeah, it
fun, but
can be
it is
so
like
fun. It can be so fun, but it's so true. Socially, it just seems like it's a go-to thing. So I think that's a
yeah.
really powerful thing to unlearn. Name a book or movie that changed your life.
I'm gonna have to go with Introduction to Permaculture by Bill
Yeah,
Mollison.
I love it. And
Big life changer.
listen, I'm gonna read it because I really when I tell you I'm so obsessed with learning systems that, don't necessarily seem like the system you should be learning, I feel like I'm gonna really grasp some special nuggets for my work, so I'm definitely
You're
gonna
gonna
read
love
it.
it. There's, like, drawings and diagrams, and Bill Mollison was the person who coined the phrase permaculture. Is an Australian.
Mm.
He's no longer with us, but he was the guy leading permaculture all over the planet for several decades, and he's kind of passed the baton to a next generation of educators, but Bill Mollison, look him up,
I
amazing person.
will.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, when growth feels good, how do you celebrate?
This is kinda new for me, by creating jobs.
Mm.
I feel like, okay, this is, the company's growing. It just feels so awesome to find talented people and say, "Guess what? I can hire you." Like, I've
Oh,
never
yeah.
had that before, and it just feels collaborative and awesome, and, the fact that I get to bring people into an industry that kind of doesn't even exist, it's it's really great. So
That is
that's
so
what's happening
cool.
right now.
That
Thank
is so
you.
cool. I love that so much. When growth feels hard, how do you take care of yourself?
Physical labor outdoors.
Mm.
It just makes every problem completely go away.
It's funny that you say that because we had a leak or a flooding of our basement recently. And so yesterday I had to do a bunch of manual labor and clear things out. And I was doing a bunch of stuff. And it felt so good. I was like, gosh, I just miss this full body doing
Yeah.
stuff. I'm so used to throwing money at the problem, and it was just so nice to do something myself. So I love that.
Yeah,
I
it's super helpful, and it also, I think, brings your brain back to, like, you know, our bodies are really capable of solving a lot of things that we're
yeah,
used to kind of just, clicking a button or calling somebody, and it's good for our brains to critically
mhm,
think and figure stuff out, and it's just good for our muscles to get our
yeah.
hands in the dirt.
I know.
It's all good.
I grew up with a lot of manual labor in my a ton. Like we had a large property, and I was constantly in manure and spilling all kinds of things, and I miss that. I really it's a strange thing, but as a kid, I was like, "Oh god, another Saturday, another long day outside." But now I miss those days. Let's see. What would your 8-year-old self say about the life you're living today?
I think she would say, "Mom and dad are really proud of you."
Mhm. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. And last but not least, when you grow all the way up and you leave this life, what will you congratulate yourself on?
Well, I don't plan on growing, number 1, ever. And I think it's just really important to congratulate yourself every step of the way. Just
Yeah.
stop and celebrate every time. I think our brains are really wired to just we hold on to moments where we're either like embarrassed, we feel like we said the wrong
Mhm.
thing, la la la, and we don't take enough time to say, "Wow, I did that."
Yeah.
Or and we take a lot of that for granted. So even if it's once a week, just stop and start your list with what are my wins? What can I congratulate myself for
Mhm.
today? And
Yeah.
you're gonna be really surprised that the list is probably pretty good.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Brigid, this is so amazing. What you're doing at 100 Miles North is amazing. And I hope that everyone will go follow Brigid, stay tuned to all the great work that she's doing. But I'm so grateful for this time. And I feel like I've gained so many nuggets of wisdom that I'm going to be just thinking about for the next couple of days. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. And let's follow up on all the great ideas because I think collaboration, no matter who you are out there, collaboration is the way, not competition. And so if anybody wants to
Yes.
reach out and collaborate with me on anything, feel free to reach out.
Love it so much. All right, everybody, have a great day. We'll talk soon.